Report on it. 4 Americans were tragically killed and lost their lives this week yet again from an illegal alien, an individual who was paroled into the country by the Biden administration using the CBP-1 app, which they created like it was a magic pass for Disneyland. That's not how immigration in this country should.
This is the reality of a wide open border. 4 Americans tragically lost their lives this week because of an app that works like a Disney Fast Pass. You need to see the footage the media isn't talking about.
Immigration in this country should work. And this illegal alien from Kyrgyzstan was traveling on an Indiana highway and he failed to brake for a slowed semi-truck in front of him. He swerved into the lane and he crashed into a van carrying 15 passengers, and 4 people were killed in that crash. This is another tragedy that could have been prevented if not for the wide open borders from the previous administration. That's why we now have a secure border. That's why this administration will continue to deport illegal aliens from our country. Thank you for being.
Wait, did you catch that? The details about that CBP-1 app are absolutely wild when you look at how it's being compared to a magic pass for a theme park. It's hard to wrap your head around the fact that an individual paroled into the country through an app was involved in a crash that took 4 American lives on an Indiana highway. You have to wonder why there isn't more focus on the vetting process itself before these tragedies happen. When you see the breakdown of the van carrying 15 passengers and then realize that this entire situation could have been avoided with different border protocols, it really puts the current policy debate into a different light. The spokesperson is pointing out that immigration shouldn't work like a fast pass system, and honestly, seeing the real-world consequences of these failures is gut-wrenching. Every time we hear about these preventable tragedies, it feels like a pattern rather than an isolated incident. We need to look closer at how these apps are being utilized and whether they are actually serving the safety of the citizens they are meant to protect or just facilitating a backlog.
But many of us are clear. The Department of Homeland Security is the greatest threat to the homeland right now. And that's why we must claw back funding for DHS and ICE. It is why we must pass my Melt ICE Act and end DHS detention and monitoring, disrupt immigration enforcement, and return taxpayer dollars back to the communities. We also must immediately start the proceedings to impeach Noam. I've said it before and I'll say it again. She'll either quit, she'll get fired, or we will impeach.
Look at the intensity of that statement right there. Hearing a lawmaker call the Department of Homeland Security the greatest threat to the homeland is a massive pivot from traditional political discourse. It's not just about policy tweaks anymore. They are talking about clawing back funding and completely dismantling agencies like ICE and DHS detention centers. If you're following the logic here, the goal seems to be a total disruption of immigration enforcement as we know it. But think about the ripple effect. DHS isn't just ICE. It's the Coast Guard, it's FEMA, and it's the Secret Service. If you defund the entire department to stop one specific agency, what happens when the next natural disaster hits or when the coast needs patrolling? It feels like a high-stakes game of chicken where the collateral damage could be the very safety systems we rely on daily. The rhetoric about melt ice sounds catchy in a protest, but when it's translated into federal legislation, the structural impact is enormous. You have to ask yourself if the cure being proposed here is actually more dangerous than the problems they're trying to fix in the first place.
There's a desire to keep these people here. They were brought in intentionally during the Biden administration. This was an intentional importation of millions of people to sanctuary cities, and now they want to make it impossible for us to deport them, despite the fact that that's what the American people have not only voted for. The polls to this day, even in the wake of the Minneapolis mistakes, to this day the American people still support securing the border and deporting illegal immigrants. So this effort basically stalls that, makes it impossible to do widespread deportations, which the American people have said they want, and that's why it's going to be a non-starter.
And it is true that under the Biden administration, there were record crossings that went down before Biden left office. But in terms of being intentional, I know that is a theory among some on the right, but there's not evidence to show that they intentionally wanted the border to be open to people just, coming here illegally. I just want to follow up on your point.
I don't think that's, Pamela, I mean, I understand
tell
that's
me,
your
what
position,
is the
but
evidence
that's
of
not. The facts don't really belie that, because they provided apps to bring them in. They provided massive amounts of taxpayer funding to not just incentivize them to come, but then keep them in sanctuary cities. I mean, the policies from the federal government down to local government incentivized mass migration. And I don't know how you say that any other way than that was intentional. It was intentional acts from the federal government to state governments to city governments to encourage this mass migration. If it wasn't intentional, how come the Trump administration was able to close that border with a snap of a finger in a matter of days, which is exactly what they did? It was a choice.
Did you notice how the debate shifted from accidental to intentional importation? That's a heavy accusation to drop in a hearing, but when you look at the sheer numbers being discussed, it's clear why the frustration is boiling over. The argument being made is that the policies weren't just failures of execution, but a deliberate choice to shift the demographic and legal landscape of sanctuary cities. Whether you agree with that assessment or not, the poll numbers mentioned are telling. The American people still seem heavily skewed toward border security and deportations, even in the wake of high-profile political mistakes. It's a classic case of the Beltway being out of sync with the heartland. When you hear about millions of people being incentivized through federal and local government programs, it paints a picture of a massive, coordinated effort rather than a series of unfortunate events. The comparison to how quickly the border was closed previously serves as a sharp reminder that policy is ultimately a choice. It's not that the border can't be secured, it's that the current leadership has decided on a different path, for better or worse. If this breakdown opened your eyes, hit that like button and subscribe for more surgical deep dives into the news they won't show you.